This week's conversation focused on the specific idea of going from 0 to 30 deals. So Taylor and I talked about it from both the perspective of someone starting fresh and someone joining a team. So we covered a lot of great info in terms of like specific things they should do, things that they shouldn't have to worry about. So sit back, relax. If you want to join a future one live, comment below or shoot us an email, andrew@josellehomes.com, and we'll get you added to the list. We're going to set this up as a recurring webinar just so that you guys can sit in and listen live. And if you come live, you'll be able to ask questions. But here we go, 0 to 30 with Taylor Hack and myself. If you have any questions, always let us know in the comments. Thanks.
Or let's mix it up. We did where you're from last time. Which brokerage or brand are you with?
All right, I saw your post on this, and you were saying where'd you switch to?
Yeah, it was
Where would you switch to?
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting. I'm wondering where the participants were at, because like obviously you wouldn't switch to the same place you're at.
Yeah, so there was more questions to the survey. I was just sharing one of the answers, right? So like we also have it broken down by like one of the questions answered was their production level. So I was really curious, like by production level, because really what the survey was more about like, have you considered moving? Would you like, are you planning to move in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, no plans to move type of thing.
Gotcha.
So I found there's some interesting data there. I just found that one fun. And let's be honest, it's a good post for engagement.
Yeah, but I like how you do that. And your engagement sucks me in. Like we were talking about this before, and you're like, yeah, I don't really know if I like this kind of content. And I'm like, man, like as your audience, it does cue interesting conversations.
Yeah, it's part of the fun. And then I'm just, teeing up the last 50.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, because sometimes it's good to do that. That's the true behind the scenes stuff, people, if you know what that meant. So
We got some
today,
Toronto agents.
yeah, we got some good.
I'll be coming to Toronto in September.
What do you come? Oh yeah, for the Remax Activate, is that one?
Yep, and some probably side missions, which is my normal move. I was talking to Cortez from the Homefront podcast.
Oh yeah.
A couple other the usual suspects. I remember last time. Remember when I saw you? Like, did you see my schedule when I was there?
Yeah. I mean, if you're going somewhere, you might as well fill it up.
Hell yeah. And how many awesome people do we know?
Yeah.
Like for real. And so only so many times that you get us all at the same place.
Yeah.
That was super awesome.
Do you know what I like to do when I travel sometimes? It doesn't always work out. Is contact an agent and like book preview showings at like 3 or 4 really nice places just out of curiosity. It's great social content too.
We did that. So
Yeah.
when we went as a team, we met up with Ravi's team, went out, viewed some properties, got to feel for it. Because when you have people moving from another market, it's so much better when you have reference points to talk to them about.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to be in some of the areas. But let's jump into what we're talking about today. So for reference, everyone, we're talking about going from 0 to 30 deals. That's the goal. And we're going to kind of two different approaches. And the reason this came up, a few different reasons it came up. A lot of people are talking about it, but a big one was like that intrigued me about talking about it with Taylor too is he's been focusing on it a lot with his new team members coming on is getting his team members to 30 deals. And you've had some good success with that. So maybe before we kind of jump into the how-to discussion, maybe talk about like kind of where kind of the success you've had with team members coming on, going from like truly 0 to 30 deals.
Yeah. When it was kind of like some tools that I designed originally with a coach of mine to deal with my volume. So as like a second year agent, I was pacing at like somewhere between 5 and 8 deals a month. And then going into my third year, I did an average of 10 deals every month for 6 months in a row. So for those people that have done a little bit higher volume, if you could imagine juggling clients and taking care of all that, and this is not us as a real estate team, this is me by myself. And I used to take photographs of all my own listings. Like I was, I did it all.
With your phone?
with the help of my wife. No, I bought a full set of equipment. I actually
Yeah.
studied for months before becoming a real estate agent
Yeah.
on how to take great photos because I know how impactful they are at marketing.
Yep.
So we developed these efficiencies, things like ideal calendar and a real understanding of like where business comes from and how to target that and kind of a growth path. And I did that with a coach of mine. And then when it was time for me to bring on new teammates, I repurposed it. So instead of like mechanisms to deal with like uncommon production, it became like a flow path to get into higher production faster.
Yeah.
So teammates like really in their rookie year, their minimum for us is that we get pretty close to 24 deals in 12 months. Like if we can't do that, like I can tell you that most of the time if I have a top performer, I know that I have them in the first like 30 to 60 days.
And what are the kind of KPIs or whatever you're tracking that tells you in the first 30 to 60 days if you have someone like that?
Well, it's a good question because we track everything. I am a relentless tracker. And I can tell you that one of the things that we're looking at is specifically how often they're scoring appointments for the first time with people, not subsequent times,
Yeah.
but for the very first time meeting. And then also that rate to how many signatures they get. That ratio, because we count signatures whenever a teammate signs a buyer representation, a seller representation, or an accepted purchase agreement.
Yeah.
And when you take a look at that rate as a perspective or as a ratio against how many times they're essentially up to bat, because it takes 2 signatures to make a deal. So are we going to be on like 1 for 4, meaning you meet 4 new people and get 1 signature, you need 2 to make a deal, so it's 8 first-time Mets for like a new agent to actually write something, sign a client and write something?
Yeah.
That might be where we start out. And then we're going to be saying, okay, well, how many phone calls did you need to make in order to get there? Because when you take a look at what happens before an appointment, it is almost always a phone call. And it's way less a text or an email to queue an appointment, especially when you're taking a look at like qualified appointments and so on. So then you can measure it back to dials out. And we measure dials out instead of actual answers
Yeah, that's
because the
fine. That's
effort tends to
effort.
matter more.
Well, I
Yeah.
think generally you do have to track what's controllable by the person, not completely all. Like, yes, you got to pay attention to the outcomes too, but you have to initially be tracking what they can completely control, which is essentially the effort.
Totally. And then if you take a look at what the mechanism
Yeah.
is that if we have enough effort and we track, we should be able to see where they need to solve problems and tweak it, and then it will work.
Yeah.
That's basically it. But there's going to be some fundamentals there. Like one, how do you find your first client? The next is going to be getting that first client signed and navigating a deal for the first time. Then you get into more advanced things like managing a database and so on. But in the beginning, it's like starting a fire. It's like getting that first little spark. And today we're talking about 0 to 30. And those are almost like phases, like up to 5 being like kind of an engaged learner. And then maybe what you would say is it equivalent to like an apprentice run as they kind of approach that 30 deals?
Yeah. And this is one we've talked about a lot because we've been having a lot of conversations, not recorded, of like the different plateaus and stages of the business, which is where we kind of came up with the concept for this conversation. But I know, like for me, it was, I mean, if you don't count leases, it was 6 months for me to get my first signed deal.
And talk to me about that. Like, so you were doing leases to kind of get your way along.
That's what
But
people would
when,
sign. I was trying
right.
everything. Yeah.
So like you had
Yeah.
this experience where you were kind of like exasperated.
Yeah, like I basically, when I started, I was that classic throw all the shit against the wall that you can. Like, essentially, like back then, there weren't really Facebook groups for realtors. I don't even know if Facebook groups existed back then. Actually, no, they did. They just weren't very popular. But every idea I heard, I would just go try it. And, if you don't do them consistently, some work, some don't, some deliver things. But I got a lot of leases, and then like one that I did a lot that led to a lot of business, not necessarily a lot of revenue, but a lot of business. Was I trolled Kijiji a lot at the beginning in both the I want this section and just general rentals. Like I was trying to like flip rentals, like people who put the property up for a list for rent. I would try to call them and see if they'd sell it instead. Which didn't lead to a ton, but what actually I got my first listing that wasn't a referral came from a basement lease on Kijiji for like 800 a month, and her boyfriend showed up just to make sure it wasn't like a super sketchy place and wasn't meeting a guy alone in a basement apartment that she didn't know. And as we're chatting, as she was looking around at a couple things, he was like, "Oh yeah, now I'm just going through divorce. I'll probably be selling my place in the spring." This was like early fall, and I'm really like, "Really?" And I was like, "Well, do you mind if I follow up with you closer too?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I just put it in my calendar. So my CRM back then was a Excel spreadsheet in my calendar. And I just put in follow up with, his name was Michael. Follow up with Michael. Here's his phone number. And then like 3 months later, because like he was supposed to be 6 months later. 3 months later, I called him. He goes, "Oh, you actually followed up." I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Yeah, come on over, chat." So we ended up buy sell totaling like 1.8 million. It worked out pretty well from a $1,000 basement lease lead. But like my first few deals were referrals from other agents in my office. So I was like, I would do the agent open houses, and I would walk through and say like, and I'd like the agent previously in our town, and we were one of the few towns I know in the area that did it, is they still did like the weekly agent every Tuesday open house only. So like only agents would go through. So it was like a 2 hour, 10 to 12 every Tuesday morning, and we'd all go through. And if it was a top producer's listing, I often would just stay there and talk to them. So if they were in my office and a top producer, I wouldn't go to the next house on the tour. I'd just stop and stay in the kitchen with them and pick their brain. And what inevitably happened is they started giving me extra leads. And
overflow.
yeah, and like most of them were like out of towns. Like so I was in Aurora. My first deal was actually in Tottenham, which is like 30, 40 minutes away. It's because these two, who between the two of them were like number 2 in town with no help. They were busy. They didn't want to drive to Tottenham. So like, give it to that kid and we'll give him 50%. So yeah, my first deal was a referral from them that I closed New Year's Eve. I left a gathering of friends I had at my own house and went out, closed the deal, came back, and then we popped the champagne. But then like spring market, I did like 6, 7 sales or something like that. Like it.
Okay, I want to unpack a bit of this.
Yeah,
because you hit a lot of things. So, where do we find our first deals? So you were doing leases, putting yourself in contact with people that were taking some type of action in real estate. That was really that was one of the ways that resulted in you getting that initial spark and ignition, right? The other thing was befriending top agents. Top agents have overflow. You are going to run into people in this industry that either have more money than time or more time than money. You want to find the people that have more money than time and make an exchange with them. Like, even to just get through the buying and selling process once or twice will be a game changer for your business if you do that relatively early. And the reason is because then you can tell other people about it. You also have credible experience to mention. Oh yeah, I just helped somebody over there. And those types of things will help you go through it. And until you've walked the path, it's tricky to tell someone how you're going to be a guide down the path.
Yeah. And I would send
So whatever
out,
deals you can make to get in that position is kind of key. Now, you had said some other things as well. You had mentioned that you were out doing things like open houses and doing other activities.
That I did a lot. And I would send out messages every week, like every Wednesday or Thursday, like the all agent page often. That was like, I'm available to do an open house at your listings this weekend. And if someone ever sent out the page, if anyone wants to do an open house my listing this weekend, call me and I'd just be the first one to call them. So I was, then my wife who's here can attest, I wasn't around much on weekends during the couple of years I sold. Like I was doing 2 a week every week. every weekend I was out there doing Saturday, Sunday open houses 2 to 4. I mean, in hindsight, one thing I would have changed is like I got this one Victorian home that I kept and it wasn't selling, and I stayed at that doing open houses there for like 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that every weekend. I was like, I would have mixed up the homes more. But that one was an easy one because she's like, oh no, anytime you want to do an open house, do it here. And I was like, great. I know I have one already. But
Okay,
doing
so
those a lot
open
did well.
houses are a big deal.
Yeah.
And the reason is because you get to be face to face with people that are taking some action in real estate, but most agents screw it up.
Yeah.
And so the first thing is a strategy. If you don't have any listings right now, you should find those top agents in your market, but only ask to do opens at specific listings.
Yeah.
So, hey, I saw you just put up this new listing. Looking for an open house there? That's the big one. Is you want to do opening weekend open houses. All
Yeah.
right. And then the other thing is to know what an open house is for. Is an open house to sell that house? Statistically, no. Statistically, less than
Find another
1%
buyer.
of people that buy houses actually walk through the open house of the property that they bought.
Yeah. I had a top agent in my first year tell me that they track it, and 10% of offers that they get, not accepted offers, just offers, come from open houses. So like it's good, but like I think the accepted offers was close to what you were saying. But yeah, they said about 10% of their offers would come from someone who'd been to the open house.
In screaming hot markets, way more common because
Yeah.
open houses is the only chance they get to see it.
Yeah.
But in normal markets, that statistic, it means that you wouldn't do open houses specifically to sell that house. Why we do open houses? Well, for the listing, it does actually give some market feedback right away. Lots of people walking through, lots of opinions. If you should change anything, if they can smell the cat box, all that stuff is going to come out in an open house.
Yeah.
So it does have a value to the sellers. But the big value to agents is that people are going to be coming through that are going to be talking about real estate, and statistically, they're more likely to be sellers than buyers.
Yeah.
This is where most people screw it up because they think they're there to sell that house, so they treat everybody walking in like they're a buyer to this house.
Yeah.
It's like if you only had a hammer, you would treat everything like it's a nail. But instead, by having a few key opening questions, you can really be a game changer there, right? So talking to people about whether or not they live nearby. If they live nearby, they are very likely a seller.
Yeah.
The second thing would be is asking some questions like, hey, is this kitchen bigger or smaller than yours? Now I know if you're upsizing, downsizing, and I'm not being very invasive. I'm kind of like, I like to be very careful about my questions.
Yeah. You don't want to get their guard up.
Absolutely. And then after that, I have to remember that an open house is a database building activity. So my job is to get contacts at an open house and then follow up with them later is where I'm going to make money.
Yeah.
So finding a way to say, hey, do you want to know, do you want updates on this listing? Do you want to know how much we sell it for when we sell it? Those types of things are a great way to garner contact info.
The update's a big one. And that
Mm-hmm.
the one that like I started recommending a lot too is like when you ask them if they want updates before you ask for their contact info. Because then they have to go back and correct their contact info half the time because they're going to give you fake info if they're writing it in. So you ask if they want to get updates on that property, including the sold price, and then ask for their contact info.
That's a great move.
And it's just a simple, where can we send it?
That's a great way to put it too.
Yeah. Just don't overcomplicate. Where do we send the updates?
And then working that afterwards and calling those people and letting them know how much it's sold, but also finding out what they're trying to do. You know, there's going to be, once you get to know a little bit more about those people, they'll kind of open up to you. But open houses and finding open houses that are going to get an audience and then learning your skills is going to be part of this game because for your first 30 especially, but for your entire real estate career, the results you get are going to come from activities or relationships filtered through skill.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it's going to work.
This point here from Tamara, I think, is a good one because I think you, especially on the first part of her one there, you have a really good one for that. But for people who aren't looking at the chat or you're watching the replay, Tamara says, I used to get tons of business from open houses when I started in the business, but I find it hard pressed now. Everyone claims they have an agent or they give fake info. So in the fake info, it's kind of what we said. It's like, offer them something that they can't get. So like, I'll give you updates, including the sold price when it sells. Where can I send that? That's you're more likely to get the correct information in that case. And there's like things like that you can do. I know we talked about it last time about how you find out if they have an agent while still trying to get them.
Yeah, when people come in, the big thing is not asking for too much of a commitment too early. It's called, it's basically relationship bankruptcy. So relationships are an equity account. When they're first meeting people, you want to make deposits. If you ask them to sign up as the first part of your meeting, the likelihood they give you false information or make defenses, like I have an agent, as like an immediate outcome, is actually what you're creating. It's more about what you're doing than they're doing. Now, if you were able to shortcut the first 10 seconds to try to become a real person to them as opposed to just the agent, because we all agree they're sitting in front of the house being like, how do I see that house without talking to that guy? Right? So getting past that to a place where they feel comfortable is key. And then here's how I feel for an agent. How many houses have you seen so far? Hey, is this the first house you're looking at? How many houses have you seen so far? And then if you give me any amount of houses, I'm going to ask, how are you seeing those houses? You're going to tell me that you're booking with listing agents or that you're attending open houses or that you're out with an agent now. This is the key part of this strategy. Is if you tell me, if I just ask if you have an agent and then you say, yes, Chad is my agent, now you verbally committed Chad to being your agent. But if I ask if you've been seeing houses and you're like, man, some guy Chad's been showing us, but like Chad's never on time. And he always has a coffee, which really irritates me. Then I'm going to know that you're not really tied to Chad. And I might ask follow-up questions about that and saying like, oh, okay, have you ever thought about maybe interviewing another agent? Or is this something that you're already in arrangement with Chad? And that might be where somebody terminates their relationship with another agent. That could be your key in. But obviously you want to work this according to the rules. So you don't want to interfere with anybody else's agency relationship. But I'm in it to win it. And I'm going to say that more of my business is going to come from taking it from other people than creating real estate business that was never going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, there's a good lesson in that. If you remember, like you would know who Russell Brunson is. Like at one point, like, do you know who he is? So big internet marketer, founded ClickFunnels, blew that one up. But at
Oh,
one
okay.
point, he was the top MLM like commissions earned guy across 5 different MLMs. And because his thing was, I'm not recruiting new people to join MLMs. I'm just going to go to the other MLMs because they're already sold on the concept and
Yes,
invite them over to this one and say, this is
you
the one
betcha.
that is actually going to work. It's the same idea here. It's like they're already in the market. I don't have to convince them to move. I just have to convince them to come over to me.
Yeah. And
And
you've
that's
talked
where
about
open
this
houses are
before.
good. Yeah.
Because you're like, man, if you meet somebody who's super cold, not in motion at all, you've got to run them the whole way, right?
Yeah.
So if they're a stranger, you got to go through the gates of knowing you, liking you, and trusting you. If they're at the beginning of their process, you have to go through like the pre-approval process, go into shop for a house, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you meet them in the middle and are aware of that, that's like the big thing is like, are you aware they're already pre-approved and like ready to go?
Yeah.
That's the big part. And
It's like,
disrupting awareness is like, or disrupting it with trying to sell them something,
yeah.
like use your ears more than you use your mouth.
Yeah. Like if you need a deal today, you got to get as close to like that offer point as you can. Whereas like online leads could easily be 6, 8, 12 plus months from moving. So if you need something today, sometimes you got to go further and closer. So that's where like open houses and talking to the top people and getting it from them helps a lot.
See, I find that open houses are rarely attracting people that want to take action today. They're further up
Yeah.
the funnel to people that are just starting out. And a lot of people are like, wait a second, how do I get to that part, Andrew? You said there's people that want to buy a house right now. But like from a marketing perspective, that's where brands compete with millions of dollars to I want
Yeah.
to buy a house right now.
Yeah.
And when you take a look at agents, when you take a look at all the agents in the marketplace, think about how good you would have to be if you were a hockey player to play that close to the net.
Yeah.
You'd have to be the biggest person out there. You'd have to be the strongest person out there. So if somebody is starting out, I would say what you want to do is try to start your factory now. Make a small database of about 150 people. Most people know that many people. Start with a list of everyone who would hurt your feelings if they bought or sold with someone else. just a list of names, right? Now you have the list of people that you want to protect from working with other agents. So I guess you're going to have to get their phone number or their email and think about ways to build value so that you can get their addresses. And now you have this group that you can start your factory on. Like if there's 100 people in that group, statistically, 20 of them are moving this year.
Or
And
they're
that group
friends
of
with someone
100,
moving, like a referral.
yeah, but that's where 40 deals comes out of 100. 20 of them are moving, and that group collectively knows of 20 other people they could introduce you to that are moving.
Yeah.
But that means that they would have to be really confident in you being their agent. And if you're starting flat-footed, you got to build that with a lot of people.
This is a big thing, I think, when people starting at zero is like they have a database. And I just gotta say, like, if you don't know what your database is when you're starting out, like, who would you invite to your wedding? That type of thing. But it's they know you, they probably like you. That doesn't mean they trust you at their house yet. Like, you have to start making them believe you know what you're talking about. Like, and that's
they
your
need
focus.
evidence,
Yeah.
right? So let's take a look at that wedding, 150 people that maybe show up at your wedding. When you take a look at who's sitting in the first row, you probably talk to them at a really high frequency. So they knew you were going into your real estate course. They knew that you were coming out and that you passed and so on. And these people know, like, and are on the edge of trust with you. They probably trust you even if it was your first deal. They know that you care for them enough that you will use resources. But then you go like a few rows back and your frequency of contact with those people probably is low enough that they may not have known that you've been in the real estate license at all.
Yeah.
So that's the first row of people in your life that you might run into at the mall or maybe at a barbecue, and they're like, "You just said you're a realtor, but we just went and bought and sold. We just did what Andrew talked about, $1.8 million of business, and we did it with people that didn't take very good care of us, were total strangers to us. And we know you would have done a better job." That's actually how it's going to feel.
Yeah.
But
we
it
just
will,
did it.
it just hurts so bad, right?
Yeah.
So that row 3, so when you get to the back row of the people at your wedding, they have no clue you were an agent. They are going to work with someone else. It is your job to save them.
Yeah. Like, if I went starting today, like my first stretch in sales, my social would be all about convincing the people I already know that I'm the expert that they want to hire to do it. It wouldn't be about using social to find new people. I would be going hard on stories, showing like previews of homes, issues we're seeing, tips that we're seeing, things like that. Like, I would go hard on stuff like that. So like, I loved when I was selling too. Like, I would, when top producers would be at an open house, like the agent preview house, and they'd start talking, because inevitably a couple agents that do a lot of home sales start talking. They talk about like the ridiculous situations, or can you believe that this thing happened or this thing happened. I would just sit there and listen. I'd collect these stories that I can then tell later.
That's awesome.
And like
Now,
be able to
I have a dissenting opinion here, and that's why I like talking to you.
Yeah.
Is that for me, I'm so nervous that a new agent would waste their time making social content that I would have a very defined social strategy. All I want is posts and stories with your face and a neighborhood behind you tagging the neighborhood and being like, "Oh, I was showing properties over here. I attended a home inspection over there." What the group that's watching you is going to see is that you're daily working in real estate, and this is going to take none of your time. If you set reminders and alarms when you start your day, every time you're in a neighborhood, you should not be taking pictures of specific houses. There's rules against that if they're listed by somebody else. A shot down the neighborhood behind you, and you want to tag the neighborhood because here's the effect. They see your face over and over and over again, and evidence that you are realtoring every day. We call these realtoring photos on our team.
Yeah.
And then you tag the neighborhood, or maybe there's like a notable park behind you or something like that. Well, then people are like, "Oh shit, they were just here. Like, you were in my neighborhood." Right? And that effect of evidence of seeing you over and over again, and also you hitting the landmarks near them, will actually like call people into you.
But you do also want to add to that insight, right? Like, the best content is insight added to it. So if you can tell an anecdote about that neighborhood that might not be known. Like, I remember I was in agent open house one time, and the agent just casually over the table, and again, I was like a couple months in, was like, "Oh yeah, we're doing this. And don't worry, my sellers, they already got the foundations fixed. I know there's that underground river here that in this side of the street really damages the foundations. Here, our sellers already went through and did that. So the potential buyers don't have to worry about it. We have this. I didn't even know there was an underground river there. Do you think I lived in the neighborhood most of my life and I didn't know that that was there? And like that would be an amazing story of like you're doing in the neighborhood and be like, and by the way, if you're showing homes in this neighborhood, through parts of it, there's this underground river that has caused some foundation issues. This is something you're going to want to look for in this neighborhood when you're
I
previewing
love
homes if
that
they've done the
point.
work or not. Like the insight that they can't get in other places is going to
I see
show
it.
your people that you know what they're talking about.
I see it slightly different. I see establishing yourself as an expert by talking about the problem that they didn't even know they didn't
Yeah.
know. So most people are aware of some very rudimentary problems in real estate, but if you're looking to make content or even have great conversations in open houses,
Yeah.
you want to speak to this portion that Andrew was talking about, which is right above where amateurs know and into the zone between them and what pros know. So like that spot in there is, and you're just drawing attention to things, not actually being like, if your house has an underground river, just
Yeah.
saying like, hey, I'm here to help you guide you so that you don't make a mistake. That's a big one.
And you can if you're newer, because I know like there's some people who look to go like 0 to 30 who have been in the business a while. Maybe they've been part-time or they've just been kind of plateaued at a certain amount and they're trying to get up to 30 now. But like when you're new, it's a lot of you can share your learning journey on it, right? Like you don't have to come in and pretend from day one you're the best agent in the world. You can come on and say, hey, like today I'm out here learning about this, and this is what we're doing. Today I'm going more in depth on this. And you can show them the work you're putting in. Because like that transparency there is good. Like even sharing like on social, like mistakes that have been made. You just, if you're sharing a mistake you made, share what you're doing to fix it.
Okay, so let's layer this out. So this is something that you're doing online
Yeah.
to establish credibility with people you already know. So we would call this nurture content.
Yeah.
This is different than like content you would make for outreach to reach strangers.
Yeah. Which is a separate piece. Like, cause I think again, initially you're trying to convince your network, your wedding invite list, that you're not just someone they know and like, that they can trust with the sale of their home. Because like you and I all have, and I can say everyone here has people they know and like they wouldn't trust with business.
Totally.
Right. And that's what you're now making sure you get is you're taking them from they know you, they like you. Now I got to make sure they would trust me with the sale of their home.
And I'm going to give a quick, like, detailed synopsis. So the way it would actually function is that you would be sharing stories and people would become aware, like one, let's use one singular example. Then
Yeah.
somebody becomes aware of of you being in real estate. Then they actually run in separate to you a problem in their own life that they decide real estate might solve, right? So maybe they had another kid or they got a better job. There's a huge series of things that drive real estate. And now they need something, so they're kind of thinking that they might contact somebody. Now it's not going to be you if these are the only two things that have happened. What also needs to happen is that link between. So have you been active on their social? Have you been liking their stuff and making comments? Hey, did you get a new car? Anything else like that to increase your engagement? Because you actually don't have enough relevance and connection until you had some of those exchanges.
Yeah.
So remember that if you're thinking about posting and you're wondering like, man, like, is this even going to have an effect on anyone? Remember that we all value one screen on social media more than all the rest. It's called the notification center. You will be more important to people by participating with their content than any content you make.
Yep.
So
And
you
this is a
need
big
this
one. Like,
push-pull.
and
Otherwise, it won't work.
when you're doing this, especially when you're starting out, do not create a team account. Do it under your own name, like Andrew Fogliato, Taylor Hack. Like, don't make a fake group
The
to give
most
yourself
direct
legitimately.
connection.
Yeah, you want them to know they're dealing with you, and you're trying to like. And I kind of made a reference at the beginning to the last 50, and what that was, you have to be in someone's last 50 interactions, because if they're in the last 50 interactions, that's who's going to see your next content you post. But if you're starting out, like 1 to 2 feed posts a week is more than enough. You go hard on stories and engaging with people. And then what I would personally do, as you're engaging more, you're going to get new followers. Every new follower you get from the day you start posting real estate content Send them a message, like a cold DM, and just say, hey, thanks for the follow. Are you following just out of genuine curiosity about the real estate world, or are you planning a move? And you do that and take that a step further. Like if someone engages with you but doesn't follow you, send that DM. I even know, like, one recommendation I got, I haven't done this yet myself, is just if someone views your stories, hey, I saw you were watching my stories on this. Are you just genuinely curious about what's going on, or are you in the market to move? A lot of people will say no or anything. That's fine. Just let them go. But anyone who like says it, you start the qualification process right there in the DMs. But like I would aim for 5 new people you're DMing a day.
And I would go with one more like slight subtle step in between those two. And
Yeah.
I would actually hit their page first and like a few of their items. You'd see me like 4 times in your notification center. I'd come and then I would actually make a DM more about what I see than what you're engaging with me.
You got to be careful with that too, though, right? Like if you're going after an audience that's on Instagram a lot, let's use Instagram as the default one we're talking about here. If I only post once a month and you're liking my last 4 posts,
it doesn't feel genuine,
right?
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you want to make sure they're so like that's where story, like watch their stories if they're there. But yeah, you can go to the last post and
I
just leave a
again have this
comment.
other look at it where like you know this because you're a marketer, but if I'm
Yes.
somebody who only posts once a month and somebody likes my last 4 things, I'm such a fundamental user that I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're going to get flagged from that group.
No, you're not like, again, for me, it'd be testing. Like if I would go on and test it, let's test it and see what happens. But
I
it's the same
love it.
thing with like when I hear the idea of if someone views your stories, just go cold DM them a question, like kind of cringy to me. But I'm also like, hey, it brings clients.
Yeah, you got to do what works, right?
Yeah, right. Like it's like, the Keller Williams name, bold. You got to be bold and go do it. Sometimes you just gotta
So then you have to
go
develop the
do it.
skill and start to test what type of conversations will work well. I like what
Yeah.
you were talking about where you were going personal, and you might try some other things. Like if you're posting stories that are related to your listing, one of the
Yeah.
questions I like is, was there anything you couldn't see in the pictures?
Yeah.
I feel as though that's something that can be a good conversation starter. I want to switch here a little bit. What do you think most agents do in their initial 30 to screw it up? Where are the things that are pitfalls?
Most spend too much time worrying about their logos and their websites, and like before you get into any of that, you got to get sales, right? Like don't worry about your logo, your name. You're doing it on your personal reputation for the first little while. Like yeah, logo down the road, great. That's lovely. That will help you. But it's it's not even just real estate, it's any business. If you're spending your first 30 days worrying about, oh, my logo's not quite right, maybe I got to change the shade or I got to do this. No, screw all that. Just get out there, start talking to people, and start trying to drive sales. Because not like that first, especially like 30 days, you have to have as many conversations as you can. Like you got to be driving that. And too many people get caught up in, oh, I got to get my CRM set up this way. And I got to, like, you don't have anyone to get into your CRM yet. Like you're not adding, like, don't worry about action plans. You have enough time when you're starting out to just pick up the phone and manually do it. Like,
So this part of the
do it.
success tends to depend on how good the people are around you.
Yeah.
So what you really want is the people around you when you're starting out to be so good that you can go out there and get in trouble and they will hold your ankles and help you out.
Yeah.
Okay? You can actually go and find a buyer not even knowing the process. And then you could immediately call like Andrew and be like, "Hey man, I need help." Right? Like that's a big part of whether you find this through mentorship, you find this through
Yeah.
teams. Like if you can do that, you will go way faster.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I would also
having
say one of the biggest pitfalls is not enough contact.
yeah, like you should have a like, and you should set a benchmark of like, this is how many new people I need to talk to a day, whether it's on social, whether it's door knocking, cold calling, open houses, you're going to a networking thing, you're going out for a beer with your friends. Like you should have a minimum number of people you're talking to, and it could be paid leads coming in. Like it could be something like that, but I would set a number and say every day I have to talk to that many people that are new. And
Yeah, so in my environment, I have a very controlled environment, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to zoom in on my team, you might say it's a coaching program inside of a very controlled environment. So a lot of things will go the way that we need them to go. But if you were to talk about progression, we have Jeff right now, who's doing great. He's about 350 calls into his first 1,000. That's the first thing people do when they get in the door here. We know that lack of contact, it really hurts you because one, when you get a real lead in front of you, somebody who's actually looking to do something, the bright lights, like the first
Yeah.
real conversation that you've had, normally makes you totally ineffective and you lose it.
No.
But if you've had hundreds of calls with people and you kind of know what a normal contact feels like, these first 1,000 phone calls are much more to sharpen the teammate than they are to actually result in deals, but they do both.
Yeah.
And then we're looking for, like, let's fast forward a little bit. We got Ryan right now. Ryan's in his second month. He's a licensed agent.
Yeah.
And Ryan's taking appointments. So, like, I think he had 4 or 5 appointments this week. He's got 3 signed clients. And he's starting to really like have to use the system. So we're working on things like ideal calendar because he cannot be reactive and go this fast, this new. He needs to be proactive. He needs to be able to do his day setup to know when he's supposed to be doing lead generation and what his revenue generating activities are. So you are generating revenue when you are showing houses, doing listing appointments, and doing buyer appointments, and the rest of it should be trying to get into that position.
Yeah. I had some pretty bad ones when I started out where like I was doing the door knocking, cold calling stuff where like I was basically just walking around introducing myself in case you happen to be in the market, like, which is the worst strategy for anything like that. Like, you're not like, never just introduce yourself knocking at doors. Have a
You
point
got to have a
of being
plan.
there. And I did not. I just like, oh, someone said door knocking, great, I'm gonna start. And then like I remember walking up the first driveway being like, what am I gonna actually fucking say to these people?
I so love that you still went though.
Well, I had to do so. I needed money, but you know, I could kind of put it
Yeah,
together a bit for
but
me.
good
Like
on you.
we were talking about it offline another time. I went to Craig Proctor seminar because like I grew up in Aurora, Newmarket, where Craig Proctor was like #1 in the world for 3 years, I think it was. But like I grew up not knowing there were other agents, and he was doing a free seminar, so I went to it, and he just was talking about like basically saying a lot of the things that I was doing or the not what I was doing, how I was doing them. He wasn't talking about me or know my business. It was just like, if you're doing it this way, you're an idiot. Here's a better way. And that's where kind of like things started clicking for me of like, right, yeah, I should actually have a plan when I go to these stores and have a specific offer and, you know, the director. And that's where I started really getting into that and putting all that stuff together. But it was like, it just happened. I was like, I wonder what that guy's up to now. And it just happened. He had a free half-day seminar, like 20 kilometers away from my house the next week. It was pretty funny. Um, that was a good, but it was just that moment where, great, I need to have that very specific offer, that thing I need to go and do it.
Yep,
Pretty good.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And like we have varying like results right now. We have one of our strongest teammates coming through. Like Jane's been a realtor for less than a year right now. She's got 24 deals on the board already for this
Yeah.
calendar year.
Yeah.
And this like she's still inside her first year of real estate. Like she just started next month a year ago.
Good.
Yep. But when you take a look at the like understanding what the essence is and just going and getting in the mix, the more people you talk to, the more trouble you get in, the more you find your way out, and then you'll gain that capacity. And then the first time you have a few clients at once, it'll totally snow you, right? Like it'll feel like it takes all the oxygen out of the room. And then you'll come out of that and how fast you're able to recover and look around and be like, oh, I don't have any new appointments. Shit. And
That's
then
a
like get back into
yeah,
action. That's another big one.
a big mistake. Yeah, that mistake, because that happened to me. I remember at one point where I got a couple people that wanted to see homes, and I put all my attention to like, all right, we got to find them a home. And I would like refresh MLS every 10 minutes. I'd be
So you
like,
got fixated, like
yeah,
target fixation.
well, I got a hook, and I'm like, I got to make sure these ones close. And I put but I neglected the other stuff. And that pipeline starts drying up, and then you got to get back to it and restart it, which takes forever. So it's like, that's where like, actually that one, like my broker at the time noticed that. And like, basically, no, like block off. I think I ended up doing for me 3 hours a day so like, no matter what, I had to do 3 hours a day of that. before I got to doing, like, I could do, so like the way that I personally set it up is I got in, I would do like an hour on my existing clients, then 3 hours of prospecting. Then I went into the rest of my day.
Yep. So that might be like something to hit as well, is talking about like what does it look like when it really starts to move, right?
Yeah.
When you start to kind of get it rolling. So I guess in my experience, how I got it rolling was finding a way to make a week that I could just rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
So I knew that if people wanted to like, so if the first thing I did is defended my mornings. My mornings were to work on my business, and my afternoons and evenings were to work in my business. And that was like the first thing that Richard Robbins ever said to me. He hooked me. Like
Yeah.
for years after that, like I worked my way all the way up to like his master's advisory council, and
Yeah.
then did that for like 5 years. And man, he was such a cool mentor to have. But that was how it started: is
Yeah.
to start to organize your day.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's a big
then
one.
for me, I knew like with my skill set, door knocking into open houses was the game.
Yeah.
So I had come with a background. I'd been on sales floors in cars and appliances. I knew that open houses felt normal to me. And I think that now when I talk to teammates about this, I want them to be in that position where they do enough open houses that they develop skills and they know that like to get to be a person right out of the gate. And then they start to include the extras. Like make it feel like Costco.
Yeah.
Have samples of things. Like we use little like cupcake, the little like holders or the papers,
Yep.
and put like popcorn and stuff in there so people can kind of sample and stuff. We even play music designed to like slow it down a little bit so they'll stay and chat.
I
But
love that
like
one.
try to really like work it in to the point where you're like, oh, this works now, and I can just like rinse and repeat.
Yeah.
And then I
The
would
slow music one, songs with the word home in it. Add that in.
and 95 beats per minute is like normal human
Yeah.
talking cadence. This is kind of what you're shooting for. If you do high beats per minute, it makes people move faster.
Yeah. You want to slow that down thinking about home.
Yeah. And then the other thing is I found that door knocking was more effective for me than open houses were.
Yeah. I could see
Uh,
that.
I turned it into a survey. So I would be asking people about the neighborhood because I was going to talk about it on my at my open house.
Yeah.
And then I would do the same lead capture where I would say, do you want updates on the sale of this house, and get their contact information?
Yeah.
And I would make more database entries doing that each week than the open house, but they work conjunctively. Because now those people that surveyed, if they were interested, I would open the open house an hour early for them. And then they could come through that. They would feel exclusive about it. By the time the open house opened, it'd be like busy. So new people coming in would be like
Yeah.
influenced by that.
Yeah. I should have done that so much more than what I was doing door knocking.
Well,
It's
I
that
just
classic, if I
thought,
knew what I knew now and could go back, like the 3,000 plus doors I knocked on.
yeah. And I think that that
Yeah.
was the difference in the way that I approached it that allowed
Yeah.
me to go fast. I worked my way backwards.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, if you want deals, you got to get signatures. If you want signatures, you got to get first time meetings. If you want first time meetings, you got to go and connect with
Yeah.
people and close those meetings.
Yeah.
And then anytime I was doing any activity, I'd be like, how does this actually function? Like, do I
Yeah.
get something for this? What am I trying to get?
Yeah. So I went the opposite route. I would just dive headfirst into things. Like I remember I was in my office one time and they were talking about power of sales because one person doing a power sale was going on vacation and asked someone else in the office to handle their power of sale. And the person's like, how do you do power of sales? What are like, how does this process work? How do you even get a power sale? And they like three of them spent like 40 minutes talking about all these questions. And I was like, I just closed my laptop, got my car, drove to the bank, and was like, can I speak to the manager?
Ha,
I was like, how does this happen? How does this work? How do we get those? And he's like, we only get like 3 a year in the entire region. Like, because like this is like, Toronto 2013, like the market's been going up for so long. Power sales weren't that common. Uh,
yeah.
so then he was like, but we got a realtor appreciation day coming up. Do you want to like set up shop in our bank lobby for the day? And you can talk to everyone that comes in. I was like, yes, I do. And then I got
You got
RBC.
more out of that power of a sales seminar that didn't function than anyone else.
Yeah. And then I went and ended up doing first time buyer seminars with the bank. Like I had RBC hosting and inviting their clients to a first time buyer seminar. And those were ended up being outside of like my blogging. probably my most successful, or outside of blogging and agent referrals, was my most successful source of deals when I was selling, was the seminar.
And that's, I think, what a lot of people don't understand.
Yeah.
Is there are mortgage people that are very good at doing mortgages, and there's lots of those.
Yeah.
But the people that are doing mortgages that actually can refer you business are quite rare.
Yeah.
Many people that do mortgages only get they actually are the only intake for business they have is from realtors.
Yeah.
So they actually don't have any business to send you.
And if they
But
do,
you
they send it
mentioned
to who sent the most business.
right, and
Right? So
that's
like,
going to be tough to be on that list.
especially when you're new, and that's where me providing value to the bank, I help them with the like host and provide the seminar, killed it.
Well, RBC is unique.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is that they are one of the largest money managers and mortgage holders in the country. And also, they do enough public marketing to really attract people before they have ever talked to an agent.
Yeah.
The mortgage specialists from there, of which I was one, they're actually out in the market, but tied to the branches. So they are a source of pre-approved clients.
Yeah.
And what they really need from agents is to help them go from pre-approval to firm sale.
Yeah.
Because the one thing is like if a sales force doesn't follow up enough, they'll do a whole bunch of pre-approvals. And a lot of people don't know this on the outside, but when a bank gives a pre-approval, they actually have to put that money aside until it expires.
Yeah.
And the biggest pain point they have is that then those people go to another realtor that doesn't know that mortgage person, and immediately they move them to somebody else. That's like the
Yeah.
first move that most experienced agents do, because they worry about somebody blowing the timeline during pending for a mortgage.
Yeah.
And so they move them to their own people. So if you can stop that gap for somebody who can source pre-approved clients, you're very valuable to them. So
Yeah.
look for these relationships.
So we had a question come in the Q&A here, which is great points. Thank you for sharing. How does one find a mentor? I'll give what I do, and I'd love to hear your opinion. But when I started out, I didn't ask anyone to be my mentor. I would just start asking them a lot of questions and just didn't stop unless I could tell they wanted me to. And then I would just keep following up with it. Like if I found them like good answers, I would just keep calling them. And over time, I just kind of started developing what essentially became like a mentor-mentee relationship. But there was nothing formal. But it was like I was saying, like I do the agent preview tours every week. And anytime it was a top producer, I would just stay in like because they're very happy to talk. Like as agent previews, they're not selling the house really. Like they're just networking with the people there, and they're stuck there during that time. So and most of the time they're in the kitchen. And so I just stand around in the kitchen and I start picking their brain and talking to them as much as I could. Typically I found those conversations went better if they were in my office. So like the ones from like another brokerage in town, not as much. But even then they'd share. But I would just like any agent in my town, if they were a top producer, I would make sure I'd go to their agent previews and hang out and talk to them for as much as I could. And then once I started finding they were receptive to giving me questions, I'd start picking up the phone or texting them questions, and they'd start answering. And then I made it mutually beneficial. I became their unofficial tech support. So I would help them with social and tech support and websites and all that stuff. And then they helped me where I needed the help. And that was most of what I did for a long time, was just I'd start asking questions. I wouldn't ask them to be my mentor. I'd just start asking them questions, and then more and more. And then eventually you develop a relationship.
So that was interesting. So you were able to establish a relationship by valuing what they had to contribute. You asked probably quite thoughtful questions and that didn't waste their time and weren't like silver bullet questions like how do I get to number one? Like what was the one thing? Like not junk questions, but like questions from your next step. Now, the other thing is you found a value to exchange. Agents were struggling with technology and you were not. Most people, you cannot go and ask them how to help them. Like if somebody came to me and was like, man, I really want you to mentor me. Like, what can I do for you? I don't need a job of finding you how you can help me. Like, I don't know enough about you. There's lots that you can figure out about me. But those things, I'm not sure like where the approach is, but you found a great way to exchange.
So like even now, like if I were to go back today, like say I went back into sales today, I'm like, I got to find a new mentor that's a top producer in my office. My background now is I know a lot about marketing. I would just go and audit their marketing, create the audit, and give it to them, and open the door by giving them something to help their business. And then, yeah, go from there.
That's a great way to try to find somebody who maybe is like an individual agent to kind of help you and give you some tips, and maybe even set up like a weekly coffee or bi-weekly or something.
Yeah, I wouldn't go to a team leader most of the time, mostly because their overflow business too is going to go to their team members. So the high producing solo agents don't have any leverage. And if you're asking great questions and building that relationship, you become the person that when they have overflow, they're naturally going to give it to you.
Yep. I might be the exception to that. I definitely have an agent outside of my team that I send overflow to because we have like a minimum transaction level and so on.
Now, is that the difficult clients? That's the overflow clients? Like, I don't want to work with that person.
The overflow clients are always scraps. Like they're always going to be too far for us, or they want to do something that we're not really into. Like, of course, we're going to find the stuff we want. But when you're new, any opportunity is an opportunity. And that's why getting agent overflow is key. But finding yourself an established person that wasn't able to start a team, like there's a whole bunch of agents that are really good at real estate, but couldn't manage like barely themselves. So that group is probably a good group to get help from.
Yeah.
But when it came to me in mentors in real estate, I valued mentorship so highly, I was looking to pay.
Yeah, which is the other model. I didn't have the money when I started out. Now
I didn't either. I set it as a goal and I worked my tail off. Like I set my first year, I wanted to do 24 deals. And if I did that, then I would get to enroll in coaching. I did 24 by June and I still didn't feel confident enough to pull the trigger until I was at like 35 in December. And that's when I became a coaching client. But now if you take a look at that progression from there, like I thought I started out of the gate pretty good. Most people get a coach when things aren't going well. I got a coach to make it go even better. And then I went 60 in a year and then 60 in 6 months. So I would say don't look for free mentors necessarily. If you can afford it, find somebody who really knows how to coach, because people that can do it can show you how they did it, but coaches are different. Coaches can build a strategy with you.
Now, one thing I would do, and I wouldn't do this at 0, but maybe in that once you've passed 10 deals, start getting involved in some of the organized real estate stuff. Like, for example, like I've obviously been around for a while. Like one of my first speaking circuits I ever did was for the Ontario Real Estate Association. It was a series called the March 6 City Tour. And there was a few like younger agents that were like volunteering, and part of the board would be they'd be sent to all 6 cities as part of it. And they're networking with the speakers and the top producers, but then they're also building relationships with all these places where they can refer business and see how things are done in other marketplaces. And there's a lot of value just from like the volunteer. So yes, there's value in like giving back to the industry, but there's also a lot of benefits of like the people you meet. Cause like generally if someone's willing to volunteer and organize real estate, they're also willing to mentor people, even if it's in an unofficial capacity. So like just from that end, like if you're struggling to find those people, whether it's at your brokerage or just in your community, go join a committee or one of those task force. Just make sure, again, don't do this at 0 deals. Like you have to focus on 100% of your time on getting deals. But once you're starting to get that momentum, that's when I would probably start looking at, there's some really good value there for the right people. Getting involved in some of that stuff. But I would probably favor provincial over local if that's your goal, because you meet a wider variety of people that you're not directly competing against.
That's actually the real ticket.
Yeah.
So you will find you'll get better learning at conferences, because agents seem to kind of be like Siamese fighting fish, where if they're too close together, they don't get along.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas if you go to a place that's national, then somebody from another city is totally fine sharing their secrets because your clients aren't their clients.
Yeah. But if you're looking to do it from like a referral business standpoint, which does work for some, you have to be in an area that does get referrals, right? Like if you're in like Ottawa's a great city for referrals because there's so much like government and military and stuff like that that go in and out of there all the time that it's great. But like if you're in, you know, I don't know, Timmins, Ontario, There's not a ton of referrals that happen to Timmins.
That's
Right.
actually a big thing we were talking about the other day is your strategy needs to match your market.
Yeah. And it's
Right.
not going to be
And
the
so if
same.
you're looking at mentors from other markets, understand that if they're going to tell you how they did it and their market is distinctly different than yours, you're not going to get the same effectiveness.
Yeah.
Like for all those people that have like deep YouTube strategies, they seem to be correlated with places that have really heavy migration flows.
Yeah. I'd say like online leads in general, online lead gen that's not brand focused work the best in more transient communities where there's a lot of people in and out. Because if you're in an area where most people have lived there for 30 plus years, like they grew up there, they never left, nobody leaves, like they know 10 realtors already. So it's like it doesn't, you have to there go more brand expertise building to start generating the flow. Like, so it can change the based on the area you're in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So to kind of recap, because I think we're almost at time, man.
I think we actually went over by a minute.
All right. Well, basically, like in the first 5 deals, it's just about getting through 5 deals as soon as you possibly can. It doesn't matter how big or small they
Don't
are.
worry about
That's gonna
logos, none of that shit.
totally.
Yeah.
Nobody should know anything about you because logos only work if they're looking for you. They're not looking for you, they're looking for help. And if you understand that, you're going to be in the right spots.
Yeah. You're not like, don't even worry. Like, I don't know what the right number is, but like, I wouldn't worry too much about brand building until you're looking to like probably like start hiring. Until then, it's just your reputation.
In the first 30 deals, this is more of a sales gig than a marketing gig.
Yes.
So think about trying to get face to face with people and be a better salesperson and save the marketing for later, especially like market to the people that already know you.
And that's why I'd say you probably had a much quicker start than I did, as I went marketing focused, and that paid off later. And I started getting a ton of leads
because you were doing it so consistently that you ended up like making leads for other people.
Yeah. And I did get a lot of business later. Like I got like a ton of leads and it did start flowing, but that first 6 months was dead because that's where I needed the sales side, which I didn't have.
Yeah, and as somebody with a sales background, I had like the opposite experience. By the time I was in for 6 months, I had everybody's attention, like things were on fire.
Yeah.
So looking at that, I really think that take a look at getting through those first 5 deals, and then the next 10 is learning how to rinse and repeat. Learning how to get that, like what happens when a buyer goes from start to finish and a seller goes start to finish, and how do I start solving that next set of problems?
Yeah.
And then once you kind of have like that 2025 in, now it's really about like how can we make this more predictable? Can we make this consistent? That's really what you're looking as you come out of this first 30.
And after every client, I mean, this is even at your size, Taylor, you should have you and your agents doing this, is like the after action report after every client, like what went well, what could be done better based on what happened. Is there anything we can do to improve our systems? Right? Like you just go through each one, answer those every time.
That's great.
That'll really, like early on, your systems will go up. Like at your level, you'd be more looking at like little tweaks, right? Like little tweaks here and there. And maybe you could do it a little differently than other people that wouldn't work for. But when you're starting out, that's where you'll see huge jumps in like the way you provide service.
I love it. And that's a note I'm going to take because I want to change the questions on my my post deal type form.
It works.
But really appreciate you running through this with me.
It's been fun.
It was great.
Yeah. So for everyone still here, and I appreciate you guys still being here because we've gone over time. Again, Taylor and I are going to be doing this regularly. And to be honest, him and I just have a block at this time every Thursday. So even if we're not recording it, we're just talking anyways. What would you guys like to hear us talk about? Like, is there something that you say, hey, I'd love to hear you guys on this topic or that topic? Or would someone like to come on one time and we consult on their business and we kind of see where they're at?
Yeah, these are the formats that we've been talking about because basically we're doing this for partially our own mental exercise. So I see things like converting cold paid leads, fresh ideas for seasoned agents, like launch and relaunch is a big thing.
Yeah.
And that might be where we're like analyzing people's game because having that second set of eyes. So we might try a few things where we bring on somebody who's relatively new and kind of help them with their path forwards. Bring on somebody who's established and say, okay, where do you think that we can help you shore up the most?
Yep.
And then some other things where if you have some subject matter that touches on what some of our friends do, we're going to bring in some folks.
Yeah.
We know some people that are fun to talk to. and so we
and know
plan
what
to
they're
bring them
talking
along
about.
anyway.
They're both fun and know what they're talking about.
Okay, so agent spotlight, and we could
Yeah.
probably narrow that down to either be like sales oriented or market oriented to kind of fit it within an episode.
Yeah, we'd want to talk to them briefly ahead of time, even if it's just email, because we've got to nail down if like, are we the right people for where they're having challenges? I mean, I think between us, we can probably do a pretty good job with any of the challenges coming up, but there's some that would be out of our wheelhouse.
I think that we should just save that with a disclaimer. We're not offering help, we're offering our help. Whether or not it helps you, we'll talk about it. But like if you feel like we can help you, maybe you could come forward with problem first. Like both of us are relatively easy to find on social media. And if you have like you're like, man, I think this is where my problem is, that might be a way that we can lead in.
You know, I'll create like a little Google form if people are interested, and I'll just send out like to people who've attended our conversations and just say, hey, here's a if you're interested in coming on and having us talk to you about challenges you're in, just put your name and what challenges you're having, and then we'll try and grab some people and bring them up, because it could be like, I think what we also look at is it someone that, are we going to do like 10 people in an hour because they have smaller challenges, or work on one big one?
Yeah, that might be the thing. Or you know what? We could also just like because it's you and me, we could just like see who shows up and do like a call in.
Yeah. It'd be
Because
fun.
then if it's not fun anymore, we can just move along. And or if we're not pulling enough value out, we can just move along.
Yeah, because they're going to always be like, and again, just for everyone still here, we're going to be trying things, and some could be duds. And if you feel they are, please tell us. I mean, we'll have a pretty good idea based on a few different factors, but we would always love to hear feedback, good, bad, what could be done, an after action report on our different conversations of what's good and not. So anyways, I appreciate everyone spending the time. We'll send the replay out. We'll just edit out like some of this part here, probably of the recording that goes up. But appreciate everyone. Oh, here's another door knocking, cold calling, boot camp would be excellent. I really appreciate everyone coming. We're gonna have more of this. But again, him and I chat every week at this time, so we'll just start recording it and making.
I think it's normally on Thursday. This time's a Friday. Look for us on Thursday.
Yes. Normally Thursday, 2:15 Eastern. Maybe what we'll do is set up just like a reoccurring webinar, and even if we don't have a topic one week, if people want to just listen in on us shooting the shit, just let them join in.
That's awesome. And that's what I mean is that like if you want to do some of these episodes as like a call-in show, we can bring somebody up who's willing to be on screen. We'll have a Google form available. And then maybe that's the way we decide how many we do an hour, is we just start to like run it through.
Yeah, and if someone's having interesting things, we just keep it going. We basically will keep going till it's interesting.
Yeah, you were saying that Craig Proctor does that. He even holds his seminar to like keep something going that's hot.
Yeah, I do. Like, I both love it, and then there's part of me that's like, I do like knowing, like, and I'm at an event, what time I'm going to be out, or like what time lunch.
Oh, I see.
Right? Like, there's good and bad to it. Like, there's the great side of it of like, he goes tactical, and like if something's good, he gets everything out of it that he can for the audience, right? Like he goes deep on it. But then sometimes you're like, I was supposed to leave an hour ago.
Yeah.
Not everybody allows it, but no, I love those ones where you go deep on topics. So maybe we'll we've gone over, but we'll probably go over sometimes too.
All right, man. Well, always good to see you. And
you
thanks again for everybody for their support.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone. We'll chat soon. I'll send some follow-up emails to everyone. Appreciate it.
Cheers.